She is a hospitality marketing expert of 15 years who is coming with all of her influencer knowledge. She's been in charge of influencers and, helping to market them since 2013. So Netanya, we're super excited to have you here today.
Thank you. Happy to be here. So for this presentation, I'm going to go ahead and stop my video because I get distracted seeing myself talk. And I'll share my screen. All right. So hi, everybody. I am so excited for this session and speaking with all of you. I do appreciate the introduction and would like to give just a little more background on myself so that you can better understand where all this insight is coming from. Well, as Leah mentioned, I've been working with bloggers since back in 2013 when I was leading PR and communications for Hosteling International USA. We had about 50 hostels nationwide, and I would receive several inquiries per week, plus enlist select influencers for paid campaigns as well. So this resulted in upwards of 50 collaborations per year, allowing me to learn by trial and error rather quickly. So I became increasingly smarter and more effective with influencer marketing with each year that passed. But my situation was pretty unique working with this level of volume. Most brands work with a fraction of this amount and don't have the luxury of learning from so many tried and true experiences. And miscommunication is not only possible, it happens all the time. The good news, though, is this is a preventable problem. And the goal of this presentation is to pull back the curtain on brand expectations and help you avoid these miscommunication pitfalls. Brands don't know what they don't know. So if you can be proactive and help guide the collaboration to meet their untold expectations, you will become a highly valued partner. So let's get into brand expectations and assumptions and see how you can get yourself up for success. We'll start at the beginning of the collaboration to get it kicked off in the right direction. And by the beginning, I mean your first point of formal official communication, which is the proposal shortly followed by the contract. These two documents are especially important because they lay out the scope of the project and deliverables, create accountability, and set the expectations. That last point is especially important because when expectations are met, the client is happy. When expectations are not met, the client is disappointed. And please note that proposals and contracts are not just for large paid opportunities. When I was with Hi USA, at first I thought it was unnecessary to have either of these in place for someone who was just getting a couple of free nights in a dorm room in exchange for a blog post. It seemed like overkill for a $60 value. But I quickly learned that without expectation setting, it was a waste of our time. We'd get coverage that we didn't feel represented us as a brand, so we didn't want to engage with it, or we didn't get the level of exposure we thought we deserved. And the worst part was the hostel managers who were ultimately comping these overnights would get upset and start thinking that influencer marketing was a hoax, which made it that much more difficult to move forward with future collaborations across the organization. So one bad collaboration can have a domino effect. With that said, if you are doing an in-kind or low-cost exchange, make sure you have something in writing. It doesn't have to be a long formal document, and it can be simplified in a few bullets. And you'll get a better sense of what those bullets should be as we get through this presentation. But you need to make sure you and your client are on the same page. So let's say you have this piece of communication, whether it's a formal document or just a few bullets. What could possibly go wrong? Well, while contracts and proposals are designed to properly set those expectations, they often fall short. As I mentioned earlier, brands that don't have a ton of experience with influencers don't know what they don't know. And the big thing they don't know is that their assumptions are different than influencer assumptions, and things they believe should go without saying rarely do. So here is what I mean. If your proposal says a blog post about XYZ brand, an influencer might assume that 2 sentences is fine, or the brand is thinking, well, this whole article is going to be about me. And if your proposal just says a Facebook post, the influencer might think, well, I'll just write about my overall experience, hashtag at the brand, and then use whatever my favorite picture from the trip was. Whereas the brand is thinking, well, of course the picture will be of me and so will the caption. And if you just say Instagram post, the influencer might think a few stories checks the box, whereas the brand wants that feed post. And then if you just say tag XYZ brand without spelling out their handle, you might get to writing your post and wonder, should I tag the corporate brand or the individual establishment? Well, I'll just pick the one I like. Whereas the brand's thinking, well, they'll just ask if they're not sure. So you can really see how the lack of specificity can lead to a real disconnect. So I recommend being painfully specific in your proposals to avoid miscommunication. The proposal becomes a blueprint for your contract, so you want to treat it with the same respect as the legal document. To reinforce my main point, brands and influencers have different assumptions. But even with that knowledge, how can you make sure you're giving your client what they actually want? Well, we're now going to go through a few different platforms, and I'll reveal what brands actually want, whether or not they've explicitly told you this. So let's start with a blog post. The blog post is the main feature because unlike social media, it has longevity and only gets better with time as SEO takes effect. It's also easy for your clients to share on their social media platforms or highlight in a newsletter or other communication channels. Please keep in mind that even if your website isn't as trafficked as your social media, give the blog post the same attention as if it were your top performer. From a brand perspective, having someone else say nice things about you is way more impactful than saying those things yourself. And the brand has plans for this content. They're going to share it on all their channels, and anyone who reads it will have no idea what an influencer's unique monthly visitors are, and it doesn't really matter. The brand just wants that third-party coverage to hang their hat on. And with all these big plans for the blog post, your client is going to want to be highlighted and elevated within the piece. Now, here's what I mean. First, make sure the brand is mentioned above the fold, meaning if someone is looking at this article on the desktop, they should see the brand's name on their screen without having to scroll. I've had a lot of collaborations where our brand is the last two sentences of a 5-page article, and if we're being honest, most readers don't make it that far. Even if it's a wonderful write-up, if it's all the way at the end, you're going to disappoint your client. However, that doesn't mean you have to lead your article with 2 paragraphs about the client. You can give a teaser like, I had an awesome stay at the XYZ hotel, which I'll tell you more about later in the article, but we want to see your name early. Next, link to your client's own website. Online travel agencies in particular, like Expedia, Travelocity, and so forth, charge huge commissions to brands to be listed there. So they would much rather make the sale on their own site. In addition, just like influencers, brands want to increase web traffic to their own site and build a loyal following. And with that in mind, also have a specific conversation about where to link to, because they may have a certain entry point they want to push. For example, they may have a special landing page for a promo. Another thing they might assume goes without saying is that no competitors will be mentioned in the post. If you're doing a roundup piece or there's a good reason a competitor is mentioned, be sure to tell them that up front so there are no surprises. Remember, it's all about setting the expectation. Lastly, your client will expect their main message points to be included, whether or not they've given them to you. They may have certain phrases they always want included and other phrases they never want included. Have this conversation with your client, ideally before the proposal, but definitely before the contract. Get their main message points in writing so that you can refer to them throughout your collaboration. And keep in mind, you can still say their main message points in your own words, but you should be getting the gist across. For example, if a brand gives you a message point that says, social impact-driven organization that does good for the world, that's going to be a bit dry for your post, but you could say something like, I love that proceeds of XYZ brands support organizations in the local community that also want to make a difference. As long as you're upholding the sentiment of the main message point, you are all set, unless they explicitly say you must include certain verbiage. Next up, Facebook. While it's easy to get wooed by Instagram because of the pretty pictures and youthful allure, Facebook does tend to be better at driving clicks to your client's website or promotion, which in most cases is what's important to them. So even if Facebook isn't your main channel, you can still capitalize on its potential and set your client up for success. As you saw in my assumption chart, a brand will assume the caption and the graphic are going to be about them. This is vital for building brand awareness and reinforcing the influencer's endorsement of the product or service. A tag at the end of the post without the context of the caption or graphic just doesn't cut it. Attention spans are really short on social media, so the brand wants to be the center of attention for all paid posts. Now, if you have a good reason for not being able to deliver on this, let your client know in advance and have a chat about it. Remember, dissatisfaction comes when expectations aren't met, so you want to do everything in your power to set expectations accurately. And even with the caption and graphic being about the client, it's also imperative to tag and hashtag them appropriately. Make it easy for your followers to find out more about your client so they can benefit from that initial excitement. Also, and this may seem obvious, but double check in advance the spelling of their handle. I can't tell you how many times that my brand name has been misspelled in the tag, and there's nothing you can do to get back the engagement of the original post. So always double check and have that spelling approved in writing. Lastly, since Facebook is so good at driving clicks, give your client the option to boost your post by offering to make them a branded content partner. This allows them to boost your post as well as access real-time metrics. This is obviously a benefit to you as well, since it's giving you more exposure on their dime, but you can position it as doing them a favor. And even just $15 can go a long way. If Instagram is your preferred channel, you can do that there as well. Here's an example of a Facebook post from a paid collaboration I did with Living the Dream. This was a new water-saving initiative HiUSA was doing that involves shower heads that change color based on how long you're in the shower. So a bit different than promoting our hostels as a place to stay. That aside, there are a few things I want to point out. First, they tagged us appropriately and used a preferred hashtag. They also boosted the post, which I believe was about $50, and you can see the post earned over 18,000 views. The cool part is their Facebook followers were just over 5,000 at the time, so the boost made the impressions exponential. Now, you might be noticing that the visual is not of our hostel or the shower head. Well, this goes back to what I was saying about having a conversation about why that's not possible and making sure it still works for the client. In this case, our name is in the caption and the title of the article, so I was okay with the fact that the image wasn't directly tied to our hostel. With our name in both places, that addressed the brand awareness need from my perspective. Moving on to Instagram, it's really easy for brands to get lost in a sea of hashtags and beauty shots. And Instagram is tricky because you're going to have your own style that's reflected in your feed, and your client's product or service may not fit in with your motif. And to be candid, when I was with HiUSA, not all our hostels were pretty. So for an influencer focused on landscapes or unique architecture, it didn't always line up. But even knowing this going into a collaboration, it was always disappointing to see a photo of something that had nothing to do with our hostel, accompanied by a long caption with an unrelated note about our hostel at the end. In retrospect, if we had a conversation about the situation in advance, we probably could have reached a good solution together. And there are ways to maneuver around this disconnect, which we'll get into in a moment. But if there's not, you may want to leave Instagram out of your offerings for this particular client. Because in the end, either you're harming your own channel by posting something that doesn't fit in, or you're burying the client's brand so they're not getting much of a benefit. So be honest with yourself and your client about what you're able to offer. So going through the expectations for Instagram, like Facebook, the caption and the graphic should be solely about the brand. This doesn't necessarily mean a product shot, but it should be directly tied to the brand. When I said there are ways to maneuver around a disconnect between the client's product or service and the motif of your feed, this is what I mean. For example, instead of a shot of a bland building, the photo could be a view from the hotel or a cool spot nearby to highlight the hotel's central location. But it should be clear that your client is responsible for whatever is going on in that photo. And whether or not your client says so, they are expecting a feed post. Stories are fun and they have their place, but they have a fraction of the reach as most feed posts and a fraction of the staying power. If you've determined you don't want to do a feed post because it won't fit and you can't work around it, be upfront about that and you can offer stories as an alternative. Although your client may be disappointed, they'll appreciate your interest in staying true to your own brand identity and the fact that you had this conversation in advance. If you don't make that distinction in advance, though, your client will assume they are getting a feed post and they will feel cheated when they don't. Next, similar to Facebook, double check that handle spelling. Also have a conversation about hashtags. Since hashtags are such a strong part of Instagram posts, there could be just as many that the brand wants included as they don't want included. Lastly, if you are going to a physical establishment like a hotel or a restaurant, be sure to geotag your location. This increases visibility and engagement, so it's very important to your brand partners. Here's another example from High USA's water saving initiative. I hired multiple influencers for this campaign, and the hackerette who you see here is especially strong on Instagram. You can see she geotagged the location, even though she's not at the hostel in this picture, and our initiative is the sole subject of her caption. She also tagged our corporate brand and the hostel because that was something we indicated was important. You can't see the hashtags in the screenshot, but she included our preferred ones as well. Now let's talk about this picture. Here was an instance where the influencer sent me a couple of options. She sent the picture you see here, plus another picture that had our color changing shower heads as the focal point. Now, if you go through the hackerette's feed, they are all beauty shop pictures, mostly with her in them. So a photo of the shower head looked completely off from the rest of her feed, and we both felt it wasn't something her followers would have responded well to. Instead, we went for a main photo that had water in it, with other photos in the carousel that showed the shower head. And that, coupled with a strong caption and the geotag location, gave High USA the right level of exposure in a way that resonated with her audience. And I was very appreciative to have been involved in that decision-making process and not having to have a retroactive conversation about why the shower head wasn't in the photo. She was also able to feature the shower head in her stories, which worked as a really nice compliment. Now, I realize it's kind of ironic that both the examples go against what I said brands want, which is the image to be of their brand. But that's more of a knee-jerk reaction to what a post should look like. So really think about how you plan to deliver on the execution of the post. And if things take on a different direction than what's outlined in your contract, have a conversation about it before your posts go live. So that covers the main platforms, but there's one last thing I want to address. No one will ever say this, but everyone secretly hopes you will go above and beyond. The reason for this is that if you do a few spontaneous extras, it means you had such a great experience, you were inspired to do more. So it's the highest compliment you can give a brand. Examples of above and beyond actions include a complimentary extra photo or two, an extra post on social media, offering a quote or story about your experience, or anything else to show that this meant something to you. It could be commenting or posting to another group you're part of, encouraging another influencer to check out the brand, and so forth. Lastly, at the end of your collaboration, the brand wants to be able to count on you as a brand advocate for the future. And what that means is if the brand has some news or promo to share, they want to feel comfortable reaching out to you to tell you about it, with the hope that you'll have no problem doing a complimentary social media post about it. Now, this isn't about taking advantage of the influencer. It's more like, hey, you love our brand, so I wanted you to be the first to know about this. And since you're such a genuine supporter, why not share it with your followers? Granted, this isn't how you will feel after every collaboration, and you shouldn't feel compelled to feign interest and to post things that go against your true opinion. But if you do genuinely like the brand after the partnership, let the brand know you are happy to sing their praises in the future. There are a few final steps I want to share to help ensure your collaborations are seamless. First, let your client know when you will be posting. Some influencers like to post in the moment, while others like to schedule posts once they return home. There's no right or wrong, but it helps the brand know when to look out for your posts, which ultimately helps them coordinate their own engagement efforts with your coverage. Next, talk about what not to include. I've touched on this in a few different sections already, but it's worth mentioning again. Again, when I was at High USA, we hated being referred to as a cheap place to stay. Now, when you're talking about hostels, you might think this is an obvious feature and should be emphasized. But we differentiated ourselves by the experience, not the price tag. So we don't want cost to be part of the conversation. Over time, I learned to be more proactive about letting influencers know this, but some brands who are newer to influencer marketing might not think to bring up what not to say. And this includes images and visuals as well. Some of you may remember that Chris Pratt got into a little bit of trouble because he had a plastic water bottle in a photo on social media, and people slammed him for being environmentally dangerous. Well, a brand may have their own version of the water bottle, So ask what not to include for copy and photos to ensure you're honoring their brand standards. Lastly, clarify if you're allowing the brand to review or fact check your copy before going live. And I do recommend offering to allow your client to fact check, as this is an extra layer to ensure you're accurately reflecting their main message points, the spelling of their name, and so forth. But either way, have that conversation. If someone is paying you a significant fee, they may expect the luxury of reviewing in advance. So get on the same page about the process for pushing posts live so there are no surprises. To wrap up the presentation, if you remember one thing, it's be specific. Specify the main message points, what your social media posts will entail, when your posts will happen, and so forth. Because lack of specificity leaves room for interpretation. And as we've seen, brands and influencers interpret things differently. And you can't rely on your assumptions because those are different too. Rather, have detailed conversations with your client to hash out your deliverables, questions, and anything else that might be a little gray. Well, I hope you found this presentation useful, and I have so much more to share. So much that I created a 21-page guide for influencers to help you through every step of the collaboration process. And as a special offer to the nomadic community, I'm offering this guide at 65% off. This guide, Brand Collaborations, the complete guide for travel influencers, covers everything from pitching to proposals to campaign reports to everything in between. It's written from the brand perspective and is designed to help you break through the noise to earn more new and repeat business. And with this guide, you can be assured you are meeting your clients' expectations and navigating their assumptions appropriately. It retails for $149, but your special price is just $52. And influencers who have gone through my trainings have said my techniques start working right away, so you should get back this investment fairly quickly. To get your copy and to take advantage of this offer, visit travelinfluencerexpert.com and click on Guides and Resources in the top navigation. Be sure to choose the guide for influencers because I do have one for brands as well. And when you get to checkout, be sure to enter promo code NOMADIC. Please also feel free to connect and reach out. My information is on the screen, and now I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Netanya. That was very succinct and chock full of information. Yes, USD. Erica just dropped Netanya's contact info in the chat. So if you guys want to contact her through LinkedIn, Twitter, her course, her website, her email is there as well. And you can get a copy of her presentation if you email her directly. So we can move on to the lovely questions. We got so many of them, so I'm excited to hear what you have to say. Kathan wants to know, is there a limit to how long the caption should be on Facebook or Instagram posts?
I feel like that's kind of personal to the influencer. I've had influencers that have like paragraphs where I would be like, I would never write that much for my brand, but then it totally works for that influencer. So it's really about whatever works best for your audience. And that's the level of expertise that you need to share with your brand. Because sometimes brands are like, no, it has to be like this, but you're the expert on your audience. And you need to feel confident to say, with my audience, this format, this length, this style is what will work best and resonate with them.
Right. Okay. Definitely finding a middle ground and communication, like you were saying. So Susan would love to know, how do you usually find the influencers you work with?
That's a great question. Since I've been doing it for so long, it's evolved so much. So when it started out, it was really just incoming inquiries that I would respond to. And then I started developing kind of my own database of who I liked to work with and wanted to work with again. And then I started going to more events and conferences. I meet people that way. And so right now I have a pretty lengthy personal list that I work with. But I also look to communities like the Nomadic Network, like Wonderful, TBEX, even Travel Massive, different communities. Like if I have an RFP for a client and I want to put it out there and get some interest, that's how I'll do it. I also love getting referrals from other influencers, because having somebody say, oh yeah, this person's great to work with just goes really far.
Okay, great. So it wasn't necessarily a matter of number of followers or like the aesthetic of their feed. It was just very per client.
Yeah, so maybe in the beginning when I was very new to it, I would just like search travel blogger and just kind of see what happened, but I'm not doing that anymore. Now people who are less familiar with influencer marketing and don't know where to start, they might do that. But no, that for me, that's a second step. I kind of get a referral, a name, and I kind of go through their site and then look to see if it lines up what I'm looking for.
Okay, great. Good to know. And Faye had a question of how would you approach brands through email if you can find one, or just messaging on social media? What do they prefer?
Again, that's going to be a kind of a personal preference. So there's no right or wrong. For me personally, I think that it's more professional to do an email. And I actually, in addition to that brand guide that I shared, if you go to my website, I have a resource guide for templates, which has a pitching template. And I go into this in my guide, but I see pitching as a two-step process. The first part being a blind inquiry, and the second is the follow-up with more detailed information. And I always recommend to err on the side of formal if it's somebody that you don't know. So the templates are really helpful, so you kind of get a sense of what's appropriate to say, how to phrase it, and make sure that you're including everything that should be in there and not kind of droning on at the same time.
Yep, absolutely. And it makes sense to start more formal because then you can tone it down or bring it down a notch if you need to. And also, I believe Instagram DMs or Facebook messages may get lost in the shuffle. So email is kind of a to-do list.
Yeah, and it's probably a different person managing the social media than the person who would be contracting an influencer.
100%. 100%. It could even be like an intern.
Yeah, exactly.
So, absolutely. Okay. So Nick and Lynn's have a question about going above and beyond. They have previous partners who take advantage of this, sending often updates with the hope that they keep sharing them. So when do they say that enough is enough, and how do they explain that we should be moving to a long-term collaboration?
I think you can phrase it in a way like, wow, you guys have so many updates. You're doing so much great stuff. I have this great idea for a collaboration. And kind of flip it around, wow, look at all this stuff. We could do this, this, and this. And I would come at them with a proposal. I'm happy to do an occasional tweet here or there, but I don't think that's going to get the level of exposure that this campaign deserves. So why don't we sit down and talk about how we can be really strategic here? And if they say no and aren't open to it, you can politely say, okay, I understand, but I am focusing on paid collaborations right now, and kind of set your boundaries that way.
Yep, absolutely. Great. Setting boundaries, definitely. Okay. So about going above and beyond and creating extra posts for your feed or your story, whichever, do you still recommend getting those pre-approved as well if those are not part of the contract, they're just extra love?
No, if you're doing extra, and I didn't mean like, you have to review like every post and whatnot, but especially it's more about the blog post, or if you have like a long caption. So it's not about micromanaging. It's really just making sure, did I hit these main message points? Am I tagging you correctly? And if you get that approved in the blog post, anything that you say in the social media should kind of be similar enough that that kind of checks the box. But just make sure that any above and beyond that you do is still on brand. Because ultimately that's what the brand cares about. If you're doing all these extras, but it's totally off from what you want them to share, then it's not really helpful.
Yep, definitely. Okay, so interesting about thinking about the blog articles. I've seen a lot of articles where it was obvious that it wasn't, or it wasn't obvious that it was a collaboration until literally the very end, like you said, which sometimes brands don't like. So I'm wondering, I'm assuming each brand differs, but some of them you're reading through, you're like, this is a great blog article. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is, this post is sponsored by Hydro Flask or something. And I'm like, I had no idea, but I don't know, maybe some brands are different where they don't want to be so in your face about that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, again, it kind of goes back to the brand preference. And they often talk about how Gen Z doesn't like being advertised to. They want more organic content. So a brand sometimes might just want to align with a good cause or a topic that they're passionate about. And it's not necessarily about pushing their product. It's just saying, we cheerlead this and we want to be associated with it. So again, that's why it's really important to have that conversation with the brand. Are you doing a product review, or are you just kind of making it that they're a key player in this conversation? So definitely varies by brand, and a very important conversation to have.
Mm-hmm. That is a great thing to remember. The younger generations don't like being advertised to. Making that content more organic, I think you see a lot more and more. I think the second sometimes you see, oh, this post is sponsored by blah, 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 people are like, all right, move on to the next one. So it definitely differs, but great to keep those conversations open. So Kat has a question of, do follower numbers still play a big part on Instagram, or are micro influencers actually something that brands consider more now?
So the interesting thing about Instagram and Facebook is that they've really become pay to play. And if you're not boosting your posts, unless you're Kim Kardashian, you're probably not getting that much exposure. So it's really easy to level the playing field with micro influencers by setting some money aside to boost. And hopefully the brand is doing this as well. But as I mentioned earlier, $15 can go a long way. And I am working with several influencers who, as part of all their collaborations, they set aside part of their fees for boosting. And as you saw in that example I shared, they only had 5,000 followers on Facebook, but somehow got over 18,000 views just with $50. So that is definitely something to consider. I think, but for micro influencers, it is a great way to even the playing field. And if you can show, I only have, 3,000 followers on Instagram, but check out this campaign I did with a $20 boost and look at the results I got, that'll get their attention for sure.
Absolutely. And couldn't you use combined numbers? Like, this is my reach across my blog, my YouTube channel, and my social media, right? If you're planning to collaborate on all platforms. I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
you could use your total reach as well, your total audience.
Yeah, for sure. And, having case studies from past campaigns is also really helpful because, total like reach numbers is a theoretical number. And, as a brand, we want to know, okay, you have 1 million followers, but I know 1 million people aren't going to be reading my article. And that actually happened to me. I paid money for a blog post on one of these, million person websites, and our article only got 500 views. And it's because they have so much content on their site that's competing with itself. And so many different writers and everything. And I was just, I was like stunned. I was like, really? So actual numbers are always better than theoretical numbers.
Yep, definitely. Okay, so Thivisini, I'm so sorry if I butchered your name. Thivisini had a follow-up question. She wants to know if you're saying it's worth it to pay for ads and boosting your views on Instagram and Facebook.
So ads, to be honest, I don't have as much experience with, but from what I've heard from members on our team is that ads didn't really do much. It's more about boosting the content. So a boost is, and this is one of my favorite options, is you can boost it so to people who like your page. So people who already like your page now are going to see your content. Whereas if you don't boost it, I think it's something like less than 5% sees it organically. So that's a really good option to choose. But I think, if you're not boosting your content, your views probably won't be that exciting.
Okay. Okay. So boosting isn't necessarily turning it into like an advertisement.
Right.
No. Okay.
It's just making
Good to
sure you
know.
get more, yeah, it's just making sure you get more eyeballs on your content.
Interesting. All right. Yeah, and it's interesting now because Facebook has the option for my podcast page. It's like, oh, for only they'll tell you how much you can boost it to reach X amount of people. So you
Mm-hmm.
kind of know exactly what you're getting. Spend $5 to reach 500 more people.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's an option on Facebook if people haven't seen that one yet. So
Mm-hmm.
Carolina wants to know, as a blogger, do I have to have a registered business name in order to draw a contract or work with a paying business?
So to kind of just file your name as like an official I'm a business paperwork, is that what we're
Yes.
I don't think so. So kind of my process when I was with High USA for paying influencers was we would get their W-9. And anyone can fill that out. If you don't have your company name registered, you just use your name and your social security number. So you don't need your EIN or whatever it's called.
Sure. Okay, great. Yes, people do a lot of great collaborations before they ever start a business. So that's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Erica asked this one. How often would you rework with an influencer because you liked working with them the first time?
A good question. It kind of depends. We would have a lot of different initiatives kind of come up throughout the year. So it was kind of a timely thing. Like if we had a special initiative or an event or something, it might be a month later. But I would say if it was just kind of, I want to do a specific influencer campaign and I didn't have something else tied to it, I would probably wait 6 months to a year, because you don't want their followers to kind of get burned out and be like, oh, we just saw this. But there's smaller things that come up in between where it might not be kind of like a full blog post and a stay and like the whole experience, but oh, High USA has this really cool initiative for scholarships going on, and so it might be like a completely different angle.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do kind of want to rework with a brand, you need to find a different angle. So that way it's not just the same thing kind of over again. And my guide actually does cover relationship management and finding an angle to reach out and some different tactics that you can try.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, yeah, we'll definitely drop the link to your guide in the chat one more time. So let's piggyback off that. And I'm going to jump to Faye's question. Faye has heard people talk about media kits for doing collaborations and to promote yourself to the brand. What do you think about media kits? And do you have any recommendations on how to make them, where to find them? Do you have them in your guide?
Yes, and yes. The media kit is the first thing that I ask for if somebody reaches out to me, if they haven't already provided it. And what a brand is looking for, in addition to your reach numbers, they want to see who your audience is. Does it align with the audience I'm trying to reach? What type of content do you do? What's your area of focus? And it's really, it's your resume, basically. So I definitely recommend that. One of my favorite tools that I've become obsessed with during the pandemic is Canva, which I'm sure many of you already use.
Yes, the best.
canva.com. And if you just search for Media Kit, you'll find all kinds of templates. So it makes it really easy to create a professional looking one.
Great to know. For those of you that don't know Canva or haven't heard of it, haven't used it, it's literally graphic design for non-designers. I am not a designer at all. And you go there, there's thousands and thousands of templates. You can customize your colors, etc. So you can completely change it up, make it look your own. So thank you for that tip. Tristina would love to know, when is a good time in the blogging journey to begin asking for brand collaborations?
So like how many followers or
or how long you've been writing for, how many articles you have, etc.
So followers matter to an extent, but you can offer value in other ways. So kind of offering if you can offer additional value as a content creator, giving rights to photography content, things like that, then you're positioning yourself as more than just your followers. So kind of coming at it from that lens, you can start a little bit sooner. But as an influencer, I would say, I'm looking for a minimum of 5,000 followers across your social media and blog for it to feel like it's enough to make an impact. But I would always try to position it as offering more than just your reach. And in addition to that, one thing that I recommend to influencers starting out is just create a campaign for a brand that you like, whether or not they've paid you to do so. Do a blog post, do social media posts, share it as if they were paying you. And you'll get some real metrics that you can turn into a case study. And whoever you're pitching to won't know that they didn't pay you. All that matters is that this is what you're capable of. So I think that's a great way to start building your portfolio. Because a lot of times, micro influencers have more of a loyal following than some of the bigger players and can still get really strong engagement numbers, or maybe they are willing to put $15 to boosting. And so they are getting the Facebook numbers that you would expect to achieve.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Interesting that you talk about creating a campaign to kind of test it out. So let's just use the Hydro Flask one, for example, again. You're saying, kind of create that blog post and those social media posts for Instagram, Facebook, and see what it does, like see what kind of engagement you get, and then kind of use that as like a case study.
Yeah. Put all the pieces together. This is what I did. These are the results. And just show that you are capable of making an impact and creating really good content. Brands have their own content needs. So if you're a really great writer and, great photographer, and you have all this quality content, the brand might just want to get their hands on that for their own channels. So you can play that up as well.
So, okay, that's interesting. I love that. So in like an Instagram post or a blog post, you could also say something at the bottom, like, this is not affiliated with Hydro Flask. I just really love their products. In order to like disclaim that to your following.
You don't have to, but I mean, you could just be like, I love this brand, tag it. That's all that really matters. I mean, if you feel compelled that you need to say that,
sure.
And you might even get the attention of that brand, they might be like, oh, wow, look, this person is doing all this cool stuff about us. Maybe we should work together.
Absolutely. And I'm sure we've all done that before. Like, I really love Hydro Flask. I drink out of it every day. And then how many in this room are actually sponsored by Hydro Flask, right? So there's a lot of brands I'm sure that we all, believe in and use. So that's a great idea. And I know in the chat, a lot of people like Charlotte were like, that's a really cool idea. So thank you for that suggestion, Netanya.
No problem. Fake it till you make it.
Yes, exactly. And then one day you will make it. Yeah. Okay. So Stacy wants to know, who and how do you find out who to address your proposal to? Are links to media kits and your blog appropriate?
Well, you shouldn't be sending a proposal until you've had a little back and forth with a point of contact. So first you have to pitch, make sure they're interested, find out what their campaign goals are, what they're looking to promote. And then you put together your proposal and you would send it to whoever you had that conversation with. But you don't want to kind of jump the gun and send a proposal because there are too many unknowns, and you want to make sure that the brand is even open to working with influencers, has a budget for influencers. So make sure you're having some healthy dialogue back and forth before you send the proposal. Okay.
All right. Yep. Of course. You don't really want to just kind of throw it in their face.
And
so
and
to
address that second part of your question, are links to media kits and blog appropriate? Yes. In your pitch, you should include both those things so they can kind of, you want your pitch to be pretty short and sweet to the point. And linking to the blog and the media kit gives your prospect enough information to work with to decide if they want to continue the conversation.
Okay. Absolutely. Yep. All right. So Stacy wanted to piggyback off that and returning back to boosting. Do you add boosting to the pitch as well, or is that an extra, like a going above and beyond?
That would be in phase 2 of the pitch. So step 1 is really just, do you work with any influencers at all? Are you willing to entertain this conversation? Mm-hmm. And then part 2 is kind of going back and saying, okay, glad you're open to the idea. Here's what I'm thinking. And then you can kind of include that in there. And then if they like what they see and they want a proposal or to move forward, then you would put it in the proposal. And kind of also kind of going back to what I was saying before about brands who are newer to influencer marketing, don't know what they don't know. And they might just not even think to ask for a proposal. They'll be like, okay, we agreed over email. Great. No, you need to do the thinking for them and say, great, glad you want to work together. Let me type this up into a formal proposal so you can sign off on it, and then we'll go from there. So if they don't ask for it, that doesn't mean you're off the hook. It means you need to kind of put it out there.
Yeah, that's great to know. I think coming over prepared and over communicating and making sure, you have all the ducks in a row, as one would say, but tightening everything up and definitely coming with something so everything is clear from the start. Great. Yes. And Nadira has a follow-up question to that also. How often do you need to boost your posts?
That's a good question. I hate to always answer with it varies, but you kind of have to see how it's doing. And then if it's the results that you're looking for, then great. And if not, then you might need to try again, try a different audience, try different, you select kind of a whole bunch of different factors of who you're trying to boost it to, maybe change that up. So kind of a lot of it is kind of wait and see, and then refining as necessary.
Mm-hmm. Okay, wonderful. And I believe we have one last question. Oh, actually I have two last questions. Oh no, I have another one that just came in. We'll take Tristina's. Are we talking about paid sponsorships or free stays / products? Should you give your own rates or should you ask them what their rates are?
So this is for both. I do recommend kind of this formal process, whether it's in kind or paid. And I think, this is kind of something that will come up in the pitch. You kind of ask about if they work with influencers, if they're open to it, and maybe in your media kit, if you wanted to include your rates on there. Just if you are like very specific, like, I don't get out of bed for less than $500 type of person, then I would have kind of your rates as part of your media kit. That way it avoids that awkward conversation about money. And when they look at your media kit, they'll see your rates and then can make the decision. But if you're more flexible, then I would hold off on that conversation. And when you kind of send your ideas in the second round of the pitching, you can get into that a little bit more. Okay. Or you can, in the second round, you can also ask what their budget is. And, that question might be like, oh, budget? Yeah, I don't have one. Or, they might give you a range, or they might say, well, let's see what you have and then we'll talk. So, you just kind of have to feel it out a little bit.
Yep. I don't have a budget. That's a dangerous question. Okay. So Ketty would love to know, what exactly do you mean by 5,000 followers? Oh, across your blog and social media, are you counting page views as equal to followers? I guess the distinction between.
So I'm looking at unique monthly visitors for a website, and then social media followers. So that way you could say, your reach across your blog and social media is 5,000. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, you just would have to distinguish, when you're telling the brand or in your media kit or whatnot of what is what. This is how many blog hits I get. This is how many whatever YouTube subscribers I have.
Yeah, so I mean, I would like to see that spelled out in the media kit, but if in your pitch, you can say I reach over 5,000 people across social media in my blog. But also keeping in mind, 5,000 for blog, Facebook, Instagram. If you're adding in Pinterest, YouTube, TikTok, and like all these channels, the number is not going to sound as good.
Yeah.
I would focus on kind of like the big three
Yep.
when you're talking about it, or whatever, your top three are.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Yeah, you'd probably have to be doing a really massive collaboration to be putting content on all those channels for working with a brand.
Yeah.
Okay. I believe we have a last question here if anyone else wants to drop any last minute ones in the chat, but I wanted to know about, obviously no competitors, direct competitors of the same product or service or whatever in a blog post. But what about dropping like your own Amazon affiliate links in a blog post, or not necessarily making it have double duty, but you might link out to your other blog posts for certain keywords. Or is that all just, clarifying that with the brand?
So
what you can and can't have.
cross-linking to your own blog post is totally fine. Doesn't need to kind of be signed off. But anytime you're kind of promoting a third-party link, I would have that conversation with your client. Because if they sell that product on their own site, they're definitely making more money on their own site than if you're sharing an affiliate link.
Sure.
But if you're pitching them and saying, hey, I'm an affiliate of your brand, and I would love to kind of do a formal campaign with you to promote this relationship, you can kind of set it up that way so that there's no surprises that you're going to be sharing your affiliate link.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're promoting the brand and then you don't tell them that, and then you're linking to your third party link, they're gonna be like, whoa, I just paid you all this money and you're linking somewhere else, they're gonna be annoyed. So it's all about kind of how you pitch it, approach it, and just being transparent in what the blog post is gonna look like and what they can expect.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you for clarifying. And I know we've had so many responses in the chat saying thank you for being so knowledgeable and gracious and spreading your wealth of information to everyone here today. So Netanya, thank you so much. Everyone, we dropped Netanya's contact information and the link to her guide in the chat there. Erica has it in there. And you can email her directly if you would like a copy of the presentation. And since they always do these out of the kindness of our hearts, our speakers, the best way you can support them is to just connect with them on whatever platform that you can. And so Netanya, I know, is excited to continue some of these conversations with whoever reaches out. Super personable, obviously so much information after 15 years of hospitality experience with that focus on influencers and bloggers. So again, this was so appreciated and wonderful information. So
it's great to speak with everybody, and you can find me at travelinfluencerexpert.com.
Woo, all right. Yeah, that's all in the chat there. So before we depart, everyone, I'm just going to share my screen one more time for some closing notes. Let's see if I can get this up here. Here we go. So if you found value in this community, like I said earlier, you can become a Patreon community member. I'm a part of it and I absolutely love it. You get updates on what is new in the community, TNN replays if you can't make all of them, or if a friend wants to join, input on the content that's created, live Q&As, free books, free guides, and there's different levels of membership as well. So this is a great way to become involved deeper in this nomadic network community that was inspired and started by Nomadic Matt. So this is a great way to also meet more of your peers and keep traveling while we're only traveling locally and safely at the moment. But a ton of perks with this, highly recommended. It will definitely fuel your wanderlust. And you'll see our roster of Nomadic Network events coming up here. If you go to thenomadicnetwork.com/events, you can see what's going on for the next, honestly, like 4 or 5 months. Tonight, we have a virtual happy hour hosted by the chapter leaders of Boston, Philadelphia, and New York. You don't have to be in that area to attend a virtual happy hour. You can be moving to that area or visiting that area and want to meet new people. So go ahead, I encourage you to bring all of your friends. And tomorrow evening, we have Emma and Marielena coming back for Namibia, tips and insights for planning a memorable trip. And you'll see next week's events there as well. A few happy hours, how to support tourism, sustainable tourism through your platform, running and traveling, combining your passions. And of course, next Wednesday, our second book club of the month, The Way of Wanderlust with author Don George. Remember, Nomadic Matt is hosting that one. He and Don George will be taking and answering all your questions, discussing the book, and a bunch of happy hours coming up. So like I said before, this would not be the same if it was just Netanya, myself, and Erica speaking. So once again, thank you for all of your knowledge, and Nomadic community, thank you all for being here and all of your engaging questions. We'll see you soon.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Go forth with